Hey guys, welcome to episode 6, and we're trying to keep this somewhat in sequence. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about how muscles grow and how to sort of get an idea of where you should be starting for weight training for your weight loss journey. Now, yes, if you've been following my stuff for any length of time, you absolutely know that calories in, calories out, basically the less that you eat, the faster you're going to lose fat, technically. Now, when we do lose fat and or body weight, and I'm going to try and make the distinction between both of those. So most people, they just want to lose weight on the scale. They just want to be a lower number than they currently are. Now, if hypothetically all of that came from muscle, that's not a good thing. We don't want that to happen. So anytime we have weight come off the scale, we primarily want that to be fat. So we're going to go into a little bit of the details about how muscle growth happens, just the very, very basics of it, and how a program should be set up generally long term, and we'll give you an overview of where you should be starting if you're a beginner, intermediate, and we'll very lightly touch on the advanced if you go into, say, bodybuilding competition type of thing. But for the majority of people who listen to this podcast are either going to be in the brand new beginner category up to possibly the intermediate category. I'd be hard pressed if anyone here is a bodybuilder professionally listening to this podcast. So first and foremost, how do muscles grow? The number one driver for muscle growth is mechanical tension. So basically a heavy load on that muscle, and then you do a set amount of repetitions. So for example, like 10 repetitions of push-ups or 10 repetitions of bicep curls is going to stress that muscle. Now, the stronger you get, the more load you can put onto that muscle, meaning the heavier the weight can be over time. And the more and more load that you put on, ideally, the more muscle you can grow. Now, there is a limit to how much muscle you can grow. You just can't keep growing muscle forever, at least not naturally anyway. And you obviously want to be somewhat in proportion too. So when you do go to the gym, what you train grows. So if you're a guy and you want bigger arms, bigger chest, bigger back, bigger shoulders, if you train those more often, they will grow, generally speaking, more than other muscle groups. So this is the chicken leg theory, guys who only train upper body and don't train lower body at all. So muscle growth is a local process. Basically, if you train biceps, your biceps will grow. Yes, other muscles around the area might get some stimulus, but the prime mover of a bicep curl is the biceps. Therefore, that bicep is going to grow. So if you have a specific muscle group that you want to grow, train that muscle group more often and with more intensity and more effort. So for women, if you're trying to grow, currently the big phase at the moment, at least in the fitness industry, is bigger, stronger, better looking glutes. So most women want a somewhat toned muscular bum. Most women don't really care too much about huge arms or huge quads or huge hamstrings. It's primarily nice shoulders, nice upper back or defined upper back, and a juicy bum. All right. So to get that type of physique, if you're after that type of goal, you just need to prioritize your training around glutes and around shoulders and upper back. Now, it's not to say that you can't still do quads or push-ups or chest presses. It just means that you may not do as many sets. And I'm going to go talk about a little bit around programming in a moment. Now, the fundamentals, let's say you've got the stimulus for the muscle growth. What other things contribute to muscle growth? So number one is getting enough protein. So if you've listened to the previous episodes about setting up your calorie deficit, how much protein that you need to be aiming for, etc., that's going to give you a really good start in terms of how much protein you should be aiming for, but I will cover it again quickly in this episode. So number one, you need to be eating adequate protein, which at the bare minimum, what I would recommend is 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. Now, this is on the minimum side. We don't want you any lower than this. Now, this is provided you're already relatively lean, okay? If you're in the obese to morbidly obese category, you can aim for 1.8 grams per kilogram of your target body weight. So as an example, if you're 120 kilos, or that's about 230-ish pounds, and your goal is to be 70 kilos or about 140 pounds, you would take that equation and base it on the target body weight that you want to get to. And my reasoning behind that is any excess fat that you do lose or weight that you do lose isn't going to need protein. So you're only basing the protein needs off what you're expected to roughly be at the end of your transformation. Now, can you eat more than this? Most definitely. But there is a diminishing returns past a certain point, and that tends to be about the 1.8 grams to about 2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, provided you're in the lean or of your target body weight. The other thing that you need is fluids, so water. It can be any fluids, but as long as you're staying well hydrated. The other aspect is going to be sleep, because this is going to impact your recovery. So getting quality sleep every night and getting enough sleep every night, so up to about 8 hours. And there have been studies that have been done on this, and they've actually taken groups of people, so 2 separate groups where people get 6 hours sleep and groups where people get 8 to 9 hours sleep. And funnily enough, in one of the studies that were done, the group that got 8 hours sleep, as you would expect in a calorie deficit weight training, they gained muscle and lost fat. However, the group that got 6 hours sleep lost muscle and gained fat. So this is called nutrition partitioning. So yes, your hormones do affect basically where your calories go and what you're building inside your body. And sleep is a huge important factor. Now, can you lose fat without sufficient sleep? Yes, of course you can. But to get the best possible results and to ensure that you're getting moving to your goal at a healthy and fast pace, or a decent pace, sleep is the fundamental pillar for life. So without sleep, everything goes downhill. So I would argue sleep is probably the most important thing you can do for your life. So you have adequate protein, getting enough water, getting good quality sleep as often as you possibly can. And in terms of your calorie deficit, or how low you go in your calories, calories are going to be permissive to muscle growth, but they're not going to be 100% the determining factor. So other things that determine how much muscle you're going to grow and how fast is if you're a brand new beginner and you've never weight trained before, you could be in a really low calorie deficit, especially if you're very overweight, and build huge amounts of muscle. It's just because you've never had that stimulus before. As you move more into intermediate levels of training, and you've been training for, say, maybe a 2 year, 3 years, 4 years, and you've already gained a significant amount of muscle, therefore it's just harder to continue to gain muscle. So you have what's called basically a genetic potential or a genetic limit. And the closer you get to that genetic limit, the higher the hill is for the car to drive up. So think of muscle growth as, at the very start, you're almost rolling downhill. It's quite easy to gain muscle at the very start of your journey. As you get more towards intermediate, that hill starts to increase and you get more of a steeper decline, and it's harder for the car to keep going upwards. And as you get to more advanced, it becomes to the point where it's almost vertical. And then if you think about anabolic steroids and drugs and things like that, what that essentially does is it levels out that incline and it makes it a bit easier for you to continue gaining muscle. But again, it does also get to a point where it becomes too steep again. Now, so how overweight you are does determine how low in calories you can go and still gain muscle. So if you're obese, morbidly obese, you can go very low in calories, provided everything else is still on point. So your protein, your water, sleep, getting adequate stimulus in the gym, and you can still gain a significant amount of muscle. If you are very lean, you probably want to be at the bare minimum, at least at maintenance, ideally in a very small surplus. Yes, eating more calories than you need, so this is why people do go on quote unquote bulks. Eating more calories than your body needs is going to create more of an anabolic environment. Anabolic meaning just more growth in general. So you do have more potential to gain muscle faster if you're eating more than your body needs, just because you have a plethora of energy coming in. Whereas if you're in a deficit, then it does become a little bit harder, but that depends on many factors. So how overweight you are, how new you are to this. But the overall arching theme is, what I want you to take away from this is, no matter what part of your journey you're on, you still want to go into the gym and train your ass off. Train as hard as you can every session to failure, pushing every single rep as hard as you possibly can, getting protein, getting sleep, getting water, and you will gain muscle over the long term, I promise. Now, when it comes down to actually setting up a training program, so I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of what I would do with a client, how to set up a training program, but I'm going to give you very good basic fundamentals that you can aim for. So going back to our very first point of when you lose weight, we want to lose fat, not muscle, okay? When you're a brand new beginner, what I personally would recommend is on the minimum side, you want to be aiming for at least 2 to 3 sessions per week, okay? Now, how you split this up, the less that you're in the gym, the more often you're going to be training full body training sessions. So if you're only in the gym 2 or 3 days a week, I would always usually train a client full body training every single session. So that means you'd pick an exercise for chest, upper back, lower lats, legs such as squats, maybe an isolation movement like hamstring curls or leg extensions depending on what the previous leg exercise was, some sort of shoulder movement like an overhead press or a lateral raise. Optional, you can add in some direct core like planks, crunches, that sort of stuff as well. And if you want to work arms directly like biceps or triceps, perfectly fine too. So if you're in the gym 2 times a week, you would have 2 different sessions. You'd have a session A and a session B. Both of those sessions would have different exercises, but they still cover full body sessions, full body training. As an example, on Monday, you might do push-ups for chest. On Thursday, you might do chest press for chest or machine chest press. On Monday, you might do a leg press for legs. And on Thursday, you might do a back extension. So they train legs, but slightly differently. Now, if you're an intermediate, I would recommend at the bare minimum 3 days up to about 5 days per week. Now, the more advanced you become, the more volume you can tend to handle and still recover from. So when you're brand new, 1 training session is enough stimulus to probably grow muscle for the next 2-3 days. As you become a little bit more advanced, that window starts to shorten. So if you're training 2 years into your training career and you're training 3 days a week, that 1 session probably would stimulate muscle growth for about 24 hours. And then you'd have sort of a rest day, then you could train again. Now, obviously, the more intermediate that you become, you can start to split up your training sessions a bit more as well. So for example, if you're doing, say, currently what I'm doing for myself is I train 4 days a week and I do a little bit more of an upper lower body split. So upper would be Monday, lower body-ish would be Tuesday, I'd have a break. Then I'd do a similar repeat for a Wednesday and Thursday, but again, slightly different exercises. As you become more advanced, you need probably more stimulus, so anywhere from 4 to 7 times per week. Now, in terms of exercise ordering, generally speaking, we want the compound movements first. So think of things like bench press, pull-ups, barbell squats or leg press, Romanian deadlifts. Anything that's a multi-joint compound movement ideally is going to be first in your program because that's potentially the most injurious or it's the most taxing. And then after that, it goes down the list in terms of least injurious or least taxing. So for example, I wouldn't go into a session starting with bicep curls or tricep extensions. I would be starting with a barbell squat. The next exercise might look like a machine chest press. Then I might do a rear delt fly. Then towards the end, I might finish on lateral raises and bicep curls. Just because towards the end, it's it can be the least important, but it's just the least fatiguing, and it doesn't require a lot of stability and movement and bracing of your core. So when you're more tired, it's harder to put more effort and keep form strict compared to putting your big compound movements at the start where you're the most fresh. So the more fresh you are, it's when you want to be doing the harder stuff. Now, this does change a little bit as you become more and more advanced, funnily enough. If you're a bodybuilder on stage and you have a specific body part that's lagging, you're basically already at your genetic potential at this point. But if you have a specific body part that's lagging, then yes, you probably do want to do that first in your session. So it's always going to be context dependent. So when you train a muscle earlier in the session, it has the most potential for growth. So as an example, most people who are going to be listening to this are probably going to be women. You're probably going to want to start all of your exercises with a glute dominant exercise. So for example, a Romanian deadlift, a barbell squat, a leg press, a barbell hip thrust, anything that primarily trains the glutes, where you can go as heavy as you can in that first exercise. Then after that, you probably want to go down the line in terms of isolation exercises, like maybe you want to focus more on shoulders, you might do a shoulder press after that, as an example. Usually you really don't need any more than you can go anywhere from 4 to 6 exercises per session. And then for majority of people, as long as you're in the rep range of anywhere from about, on the low end, 5 repetitions, all the way up to the high end of about, I'd say 20, possibly 25, depending on the exercise and the equipment you have access to. So what that basically means is some exercises are going to lend themselves better to certain rep ranges. If you've ever tried to do a 20 rep, as many possible reps as you can for a barbell squat, if you're doing 20 repetitions on barbell squats, it sucks balls, all right? It's not fun. Whereas for me, mentally preparing just to go into 5 really heavy, hard sets of barbell squats, I just need to do 5 and it's over. Now, a lot of the research currently is stating that it doesn't matter the rep target that you pick. Right? You can do 5 reps, you can do 10 reps, you can do 15 reps. As long as you train close enough to failure, you will still get the same adaptations. But like I was saying before, certain exercises do definitely lend themselves better to certain rep ranges. So for example, it's very hard to do with strict form 5 repetitions of, say, lateral raises, because it's such a small muscle group. To get the weight from the bottom position to the top position, you just heave that weight up. It's just hard to do. So for example, lateral raises is a good example that it probably would lend itself better to the ranges of, say, 10 to 25 reps. Whereas things like leg presses generally will probably lend themselves better to the range of, say, 5 to maybe 8 or 10 repetitions. If you're a bit sadistic and you like the pain, definitely go more than that. It's up to you. Now, if we're talking about, let's say, hip thrusts, that's a widely varied exercise. That can be anywhere from 5 up to 20 reps. It just depends on what you enjoy doing more often. Now, and if you enjoy doing it, you're more likely to stick to it as well. Now, you can also change repetitions up from month to month if you feel like you want to vary it up. Me personally, what I like to do is I would usually keep the same exercise, the same program, same give or take rep range for months on end. As long as you're still making progress on that exercise, there is no reason that you should be changing it. Unless just for variety, you wanted to try something different, you saw a different variation of your exercise. Instead of a really strict lateral raise, you want to try, just for example, today we added in chest supported lateral raises, just avoids a lot of the cheating. And it turns out that that's just a better exercise to do compared to a standing. It's just a bit more strict in terms of form. So that will now be, going forward, that will be now a permanent exercise that I do in my program and probably many of my client programs. So you don't be afraid to change things up. Now, I want you to think in terms of gaining muscle, it's a month and a year's process. So yes, you can gain a bit of muscle quite fast at the start of your journey, but it tapers off quite quickly, and in terms of strength, that also tapers off quite quickly. So at the very start, you might increase your weights 5 kilos, 10 kilos per week, and that could be going for 5 to 6 or 7 weeks. After that initial increase in strength, you're most likely going to start running into plateaus, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with plateaus. The only time if you would really want to change out an exercise, if your plateau is longer, I'd say longer than 4 weeks, with everything else all being equal, your protein's on point, your water intake is good, your sleep's been fantastic, and you're still not progressing on that exercise, great. You might either want to change up the rep range. So instead of doing 8 reps, you might want to try for 10 reps or 5 reps. Or you may want to swap out that leg press for a different variation of a leg press. Now, doesn't mean you have to change your entire program. It might be every other exercise is still progressing. It might be just that one exercise, and then you just swap out that one exercise for something else. All right? And you can also change the order in which you do your exercises, and that can change also the stimulus that you get. All right, so that's a very quick summary of what I would usually recommend for most people starting off. To quickly sum it up again for you guys, the main driver is going to be mechanical tension. So just go into the gym, train hard, really train hard with really good form. What you train grows. All right. If you're doing heaps and heaps of ab crunches and side bends, your waist is going to increase over time. If you train a lot of abs, it's going to give you a thicker waist, which is arguably the opposite of what most people are trying to achieve. If you want a bigger bum, you need to train bum. If you want bigger arms, you need to train arms. What the basics of what you need for growth is enough protein, enough water, adequate sleep, calories dependent on how advanced you are or non-advanced you are, and how overweight you are, so how much excess fat that you have. The more fat that you have, the lower in calories you can get away with. The leaner you are, the more you need to eat closer to maintenance. Beginners, usually 2 to 3 sessions a week. If you're intermediate, been training for maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years, I would suggest around 3 to 5 sessions a week. And then advanced, you're looking at probably 4 to 7 times per week. Cool. Every time you go in, between full body, 2 to 3 times a week for beginners. Intermediate, you can go more upper lower splits or push-pull legs type splits. But again, if you're on the 3 times a week, I'd still probably suggest full body training. And then in the advanced, you're probably looking at doing body part splits. So push-pull legs, chest, back, shoulders, legs, upper lower type splits. Just depends on how frequently you're training. So that's pretty much it, guys. I hope you found this helpful. Stay tuned for the next episode. I'm going to try and get these out again weekly. If you have any questions, as always, post them on the platform that you are watching. Instagram, Spotify, whichever one it is, and I will see you in the next episode.